We were doing a deal with one of the major leagues. I wasn't a big sports person. And I said, can you just tell me, like, what should I read before I go in? Like, should I know players' names or should I know teams' names? Like, what should I memorize so I can talk their talk? And he goes, just be you. Like, they have families and they have just be, that will be your best. He kind of gave me permission to just be me. And so I would always take advice from people and just believe what they told me and then try it. It was still intimidating sometimes, but I just looked at it as an opportunity. And I think I was successful because I put the relationship first and really thought about their needs. And now that I have done a lot more around negotiation, that's one of the things you really understand the interests of the other party that helps you have a light into what's important to them, which is always important in a negotiation.
In a corporate world where all employees have great leaders with no egos that create fun cultures where people can do their best work, the employees and companies thrive while doing great things for the customers, themselves, and each other.
Well, we know that rarely happens. I'm Jeff Palacio. I have been a leader for over 40 years for every t-shirt size company, from small 16 employees to extra large over 1 million. Please join me while I interview outstanding leaders that will share stories of great leadership and not so great. It will help you become a better leader while poking fun about all the crazy shit that happens in corporate America.
Hi, I'm Joe Deshawn, and welcome to the Corporate Couch with Jeff Palacio. Today's episode is brought to you by ExecHQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. Today, Jeff is interviewing Susie Tomenchok. Susie is a keynote speaker, team facilitator, and executive coach specializing in negotiation skills. She has lent her skills to dozens of businesses, including Comcast, Cardinal Group Companies, eBay, Remax, and many others. She has a degree in communications from Colorado State University. You can learn more about Susie at susietomenchok.com or at negotiationlove.com. Let's listen as Jeff talks to Susie.
Susie, welcome to the Corporate Couch this afternoon.
Thank you. I'm super excited to be here.
Oh my God, not more excited than me. Maki Musavi, local Kansas City executive coach, introduced us that you have to meet Susie. And so this is a great honor for me. I can't wait to talk about your career and your leadership wisdom to share with our listeners. So thank you.
Yeah, such a pleasure, but I'm not from Kansas City, so
That's all
I
right.
apologize.
I'm branching out.
Okay.
I'm branching out. I will always interview great Kansas City leaders, but I do want to show that there are other leaders
There's other
outside
people.
the
There
great
are good
Kansas.
people.
Yeah, there are good people, and you're one of them. So that's great. Let's start with a fun question. Even that people that know you fairly well, Susie, what one thing would surprise them about you?
Okay, I'm going to say it. I was prom queen. And so it's so interesting because that really, depending on your relationship with high school, is
Right.
either like
They love it or they hate
impressive
you.
or they hate it. So it's very funny. I don't know why I came up with that one, but I think I don't know, it was surprise people, but it's kind of a funny.
Did you ever date the prom king?
No,
Okay.
I didn't.
You didn't even like him.
I wasn't that popular in high school. And so there was no way.
Well, wait,
I
how
don't
do
even
you
know how I
become the
got it.
prom queen without being
I don't
popular?
know. I think somebody must have put a bunch of extra votes in the ballot box. That's what I'm going with.
Well, to my knowledge, you're the first prom queen to appear on the Corporate Couch. So
Okay.
congratulations for that. That's big. That's a big. So Susie, where did you grow up, and what did you love doing as a child?
I grew up in Wheat Ridge, Colorado, which is right outside of Denver. I still live in the metropolitan area here, so I'm like one of two natives because so many people have moved into this area. What did I love to do? I had a really big imagination as a kid. So I think I would spend a lot of time in the world that I created. And I think it really stood out to me because I have three girls, all in their two in their 20s and one in their 30s. I have to be able to say that they're not all in their 20s anymore. And they are very left-brained and have like zero imagination. So while I believed in all those things, about, I don't want to spoil anybody's, belief on some of the characters that are a part of holidays, but my girls learned really easy, really quick, really early. They didn't believe in all those things. They
Right.
started asking a lot of questions. But man, I believed till I was like 18.
There you go. I'm a big Christmas person. It's the magic of Christmas, so
Yep,
that's good. But look at the money you saved because they didn't believe in the tooth fairy. I mean, that's
it's
phenomenal.
true. Yeah, that's you know what? That's looking at the bright side. That's for sure.
um, so, did you have any aspirations growing up? Like, hey, when I'm an adult, I want to be this. What was this
Yeah.
for you? If you had anything?
I always wanted to be a singer on stage,
Yeah.
and I would, do the typical using my brush in front of the mirror and singing along to albums. But what's interesting to me is I love being on stage
Yeah.
now. Not, I don't sing, but I've always loved being able to make people happy or enriching people with something. Not that it's not necessarily my wisdom, but how can I make their lives a little bit better? And so I find a lot of satisfaction in that. And so it's nice to be able to look back and say, at least I had some ability to, I went down a path. I guess it was holding a microphone.
Yeah.
But I really enjoy that.
Yeah, I interviewed Jamie Crosby, founder of her own company, celebrating 20 years, I believe, in January, and she loved performing in front of an audience. And I think she was a pageant person, so her first, her largest speech when she was 16 was in front of 500 people, and that was her
Wow.
talent, was public speaking. So very interesting, but same thing. She does
Yeah.
keynotes like you do and presents to corporations, and you would actually like her a lot too. So maybe I'll do an introduction after
Yeah.
this. Yeah, that's
Awesome.
great. I have to ask. This is a Mike Wallace 60 minutes. It's gonna take it might take you down, but what was your favorite song to sing in front of the mirror growing?
Oh my gosh, that is such an interesting, so many things float in front of my eyes. Oh, probably a Grease song. Definitely.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, because
Uh,
there was so much because you were able to see and hear.
My daughter, who's 32, we talk about that all the time. She loved playing Grease. I had the CD in my car. It's yeah. She watched it a million times, and my son did too. So yeah, great songs, great soundtrack,
Yeah,
and John Travolta, Olivia Newton-John.
totally.
Yeah, so good. Did you go right from high school to Colorado State University?
I did.
Yeah.
I did. I went right there. My sister, it's in Fort Collins, and my sister had gone there. And so I always did what my older siblings would do. And so that was kind of that was the factor that made me decide on going up there. But yeah, it was a great experience.
Was your initial major that you had to declare when you got there the same one you graduated with, and what major was that?
Ooh, yeah, it took me a while to decide. Oh, funny enough, wow, you were really making me just be very vulnerable. I remember going there and having to take the course before the semester started on like writing 101 because I guess the test that I took, they needed to get me up to the right level. And it's interesting thinking about that now because I have wrote a book and I've done a lot of writing, and I'm really proud of myself that I'm a good writer now, but it really took a lot of work to get me there. So I think back on that, and funny enough, I was a communications major. So I think that it was not my intention, especially the way I went into college, that I thought I was going to be exceptional at communication. But I remember I was in a speech class, and I did a speech in front of the class and they said, oh, we want to record it so that we can use this for future classes, as, because it was really good. And I remember just being like, I got in front without people in front of me and I just couldn't do it because it was like, I can't talk in front of just a
Right.
camera.
Yeah.
So it's funny to think back on that and to see where I am because I had never made all of that connection. So thank you.
Yeah.
It's
Interesting.
like
Yeah.
therapy.
There you go. That's why it's called the corporate couch, Susie.
Okay.
I mean,
Okay. Ding, ding, ding.
there you go. Because being in corporate America, sometimes you need a good therapist. So anyhow, did you take debate in high school? Like, what made you a really good public speaker at your age?
Oh, I did not take debate. I think that was really intimidating to me because those people had
Me
to
too.
think so quickly on their feet. I was so impressed. I was in all the choruses and like the top mixed chorus group. So we had to do dancing. I'm using air quotes, dancing along with our, singing, and I really enjoyed that. I don't know how. I think that was probably the first key to I like to be in front of audiences and I can connect. And boy, it's taken me a long time to really have self-belief in that and be able to embrace that and go, I am really good at this. Just believe it.
Right.
So it's taken me a long time to
Yeah.
get there.
Yeah. It's a journey for all of us, for sure.
Yeah, for sure.
So you graduated from CSU. What was your first job out of college, and how did you get that job?
So I did a local origination, which means the cable company in the city had a deal where you did local news, local sports, interest. So it's like, think of a news channel on a very small scale. There's like only 5 of us. So I got to do camera work and I got to do in front of the camera work. And so I got to do a variety. I got the job only because the guy they had given the offer to broke his arm and
Oh,
then they offered it to me. So I was not the selected one, but I got it by default. And the guy that hired me told me that. I don't know that that was probably the best
right.
piece to tell
Here's an
me.
ego boost for you, Susie. Welcome to the company, and you got the job because we gave it to another guy, but he broke his arm.
Exactly.
I love that.
So,
I love
yeah.
that. And how did you navigate into that job? Like how, because we're in the similar age demographic. There wasn't like Indeed or Monster or Glassdoor or LinkedIn to get a job. So how did
Yeah.
you find it?
It was in the newspaper and I wrote and printed and signed a cover letter along with my resume to that location, then got a phone call on my parents' home phone
There you go.
to go. So yes, definitely old school. And I remember when I got the job, I called my then boyfriend who I ended up marrying and I said, I'm making 12,500 a year. And he goes, you do know that's not a lot of money, right?
But you were an on-the-air talent, and you learned so
Yeah.
many different things at that job, obviously.
Yeah.
Yeah,
It was a great job. I
yeah,
really think it was so helpful
yeah.
in so many ways.
So how did you navigate from there, that first job? I know you spent about 10 years at Comcast starting in 2000. So how did you kind of end up at Comcast?
Yeah, looking back, you can see the path, but you certainly don't know the path when you're there. I started at a earlier company that ended up merging into Comcast. I left and worked for Discovery as in a separate offshoot channel that they were launching, which was kind of like a startup with funding. And then found my way back to Comcast. And if you know anything about telecommunications back in the day, a lot was based in Denver, and there were a lot of companies that were owned by the same people that rolled up to the same place. So everything was kind of done on a napkin at a bar or on a golf course, and nothing was really papered. And when I got to Comcast, I was put into a business role, and they said, you need to make this like legitimate. We need to pull this all apart and provide services and have a contract and actually charge our customers, which was not very popular at first. But I built the relationships and they started to realize we're going to pay for this, but we were going to provide a better service. We weren't just going to try to plug it in and figure it out and have on-air issues. And so I started building relationships there, and they started putting me in bigger deals when we were negotiating with big government agencies, and Discovery was one of our clients, Viacom, and all of these big names. And they were big contracts. We originated networks, and they were distributed over satellites, which was expensive and highly technical. And so these contracts were 7 years and millions of dollars of equipment plus people that I was sitting across from CTOs and CEOs because those were the decision makers. And so I kind of had to figure it out and pretend for a while. And then I kept being successful, so they kept putting me in those roles. So I feel like I really lucked out that I joined at a time that there was a lot of things that weren't all tied together, and I somehow figured out how to leverage my personality and connection, and I just learned a lot. So I really loved that experience.
Yeah, no, it's phenomenal. And I was in telecom in those days, so I think we chatted about it when we first met. But yeah, I mean, it was actually your company owned 20% of the company I worked at, Sprint PCS. Sprint owned, now T-Mobile owned 40%, and Comcast, your company, Cox, and TCI
Yeah.
own the other 60%. But yeah, I mean, it sounds like you were a new initiative, so you kind of created your own path. I know you wrote a book on negotiation. We'll
Yeah.
chat about that, and you do workshops and for negotiation and things like that. But were you a natural negotiator, and kind of how did you hone your craft? Obviously, by doing it, and not only doing it on as part of your job, but doing it at high stakes.
Yeah.
It's one thing to play poker with your friends, but you were playing poker with, in Las Vegas in the World Championship of Poker or whatever.
Yes, it was. It did feel that way. Like sometimes I had a out of body kind of like, what in the heck are you doing here? I can't believe you're having these conversations. And I just learned to be a really good observer. I also then started really reading everything I could and taking courses through big universities just to feel like at least I know the language. And I would try things that I would learn, see what would feel natural to me. And so just over time, I got more comfortable. I actually had an executive coach was really helpful too. And I remember we were doing a deal with one of the major leagues, and I wasn't a big sports person. And I said, can you just tell me, like, what should I read before I go in? Like, what team should I know? Should I know players' names, or should I know teams' names? Like, what should I memorize so I can talk their talk? And he goes, just be you. Like, they have families and they have that will be your best. He kind of gave me permission to just be me. And so I would always take advice from people and just believe what they told me and then try it. And so I just started, it was still intimidating sometimes, but I just looked at it as an opportunity. And I think I was successful because I put the relationship first and really thought about their needs. And now that I have done a lot more around negotiation, that's one of the things. You really understand the interests of the other party. That helps you have a light into what's important to them, which is always important in a negotiation.
Yeah, what a great advice from your coach, mentor, because I mean because you couldn't learn the history of baseball or even what the current situation. I mean, you couldn't fake that. I mean, yeah, you can read some articles or whatever, but
Yeah.
just to be more familiar. But I love that advice. I mean, especially when you first started doing this, but even were a lot of times were you the only female in the room doing
Oh,
these
yeah.
negotiations, and what did that feel like?
Oh my gosh. Yes, because this was highly technical. We were uplinking through digital encryption hardware that then was sending the signal up to a satellite, and I had to learn analog versus digital, and then you had to multiplex it. And so like all along the whole chain was so technical. So I would have to bring people in with me to talk the technology, and the service level agreements were really high. So I was very often, most always actually, now that I'm thinking it through, the only woman in the room. And at first I was intimidated by it, but then I remember one of, he's a business person and a lawyer, and he was on the other side of the table and we became good friends. And I remember years after knowing him, he goes, "Did you go to school for engineering?" And I thought, what the best compliment I could have gotten,
Wow.
which, yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm going to tell people that because that's really, and I just remember,
That's
to me, that meant I cared enough to understand enough
mhm.
and learn from the people around me. And I think people respected that. I didn't just show up. I really understood the operation, got to know the people that actually operate. I wasn't like a salesperson that did the deal and then good luck, people,
Right.
it's all up to you. And so I think that really helped. But yeah, so to answer your question, I think when looking back to, I wish I would have known how unique it was. And because I held the revenue, I wasn't treated like a minority in the room. And so I didn't realize the influence I had. And I wish I would have, I didn't understand then that I was given the attention not because of who I was, but because of the position I held. And I had an opportunity that I could have brought more women in with me, but I didn't understand the complexity of
Right.
that. I mean, looking back at that now, it sounds ridiculous, but I didn't understand then, but I often was the only woman in the room.
Right. What was the craziest thing a person on the other side of the negotiation table did during all your years of doing this?
There was one guy, I talk about him in my book. He knew so much. He knew technology and operations, and he knew every cost. And so he was intimidating, and he used humiliation and anger to his benefit. There was somebody on our team, my peer, that we didn't have a lot of respect for, and he knew that. He knew that our relationships weren't solid on our side of the table, and he actually humiliated that person, which kind of made us feel like we were glad to see it in some ways, like until we realized that that was his game.
Right.
And so I really have thought a lot about that because people ask, anger and surprise are two emotions that really evoke the most reaction to us as humans. And so you need to be aware of those. And I think he learned to use those and then not necessarily consciously did it, but would just do it because he knew it would shift the power in the room. And that was crazy to me. Like that was just mean,
Right.
really, really mean that he would do that.
Yeah.
And he did it too. I mean, he would do deals where he was below, he got them to negotiate. I also worked for him for a while, and he would negotiate a deal with our vendor and get them lower than their cost. And I remember then having to deal with the vendor, and they were so frustrated.
Sure.
It was such a bad relationship moving
Yeah.
forward, but he would wipe his hands of the contract and let us deal with it. And so that's just not good. That's just
Yeah.
not good way of negotiating. So that was crazy to me that
Right.
people, especially men, use emotion.
Yeah.
That was foreign to me at that time.
Well, we all know that women are the most evolved species on Earth. So there you go. You had that going for you. Um, well, where did you get the skill of negotiation? Like, were you able to get like stuff from your parents, like the car and stuff at the grocery store when you were a little kid? Like, did you have? Was it innate to you?
I think that's so interesting. One of the early jobs when I was when I've always been really good. My coach said to me, "I've never met anybody that takes advice and implements it so fast." And I think I would know somebody was an expert and learn and adopt it. And I remember when looking for my first job, whoever told me, you get the interview and then you call back at this day and you do this and this and this and this. And I would just follow directions. And I think that I learned through that and through association. I wouldn't say, if I would have known I was saying yes to that job because I was going to be a negotiator, I probably would have said no. It was later looking back that I'm like, oh, I'm negotiating. So I don't think I was ever good. I tend to be, I never like to take advantage of people. And so I would have said, if you would have said out of college, that I was probably somebody that would just cave right away.
Right.
But I mean, if you don't mind, the way I think the biggest story for me, that person that I said that my peer, Dan, would ask for everything and I would just take whatever they gave me. And I started to see that Dan, they would anticipate him. So the meeting before the meeting, when they were talking about our compensation or the office or whatever they were going to give us, they'd always consider, well, Dan will argue with us, so let's give him this to appease him. But Susie just takes whatever we give her. So I learned that if you don't ask, they'll just never consider it. Don't be the path of least resistance. At least put your voice in there. The worst thing is no.
Right.
And I really learned that in my corporate role. And I think as a woman, then empowering others to just ask and advocate for yourself.
Yeah.
That's the way I look at it. I don't really
Yeah.
see myself as a great negotiator. I just know the skills to be clear about what you want. And if it's important to you, it's worth going for it.
Right. Yeah, no, I love that. Yeah, I watched one of your reels on your website where what I loved about the reel is your face never appears, and it's all clients talking about what they learned from you, and and I don't know how many people, 10, 15. It's a great montage
Thanks.
that I thought was really nice. You've mentioned a executive coach, a coach several times. How old were you when you started working with a coach?
I was really fortunate that Comcast gave me that opportunity. I was in my late 20s. So I was high enough in the organization that they gave me a coach. And I didn't know what to do with a coach. Like, I find that too. I find when people work with me, sometimes they don't know how to work with a coach. It's a funny kind
Right,
of
right.
like thing. And he actually taught me how to really leverage him.
Yeah.
And I remember that peer also got the option to work with my coach, and my coach said no to him because he wasn't as self-aware and didn't think he could really give him anything. He wouldn't listen, basically. And I thought that's really interesting too. It's our choice how we develop and how we learn. It's a little bit of nature and nurture.
Yeah,
And so that's
absolutely.
our choice. So I
Hmm.
learned a lot from that.
Yeah, and I would say, I've interviewed over 100 people on my podcast. I mean, a constant among these great leaders is they're lifelong learners, right? Because
Hmm.
the journey never stops, and once
Yeah.
I don't know whose quote this is, but once start stop learning, you stop living, really. Because
Hmm.
it's you should be learning to the end, really. I It took me a while to think about that, but I used to think like executives, like why do they need a coach? Like they're
Hmm.
already a CFO, a CEO, a senior VP, whatever. But the more I grew in my own leadership journey, I'm like, well, yeah, I mean, like M- Michael Jordan has a coach, LeBron
Yeah.
James has a coach, like and they have multiple coaches. You have a fitness trainer, you have somebody from a mindset trainer. Like there's so many different things. So yeah, that was one of my big ahas in my own leadership journey. Um, so a great run at Comcast. What was the reason to move on after about 10 years?
There was some politics, a little bit of politics that were happening. And then my client, that was my client for 10 years, was starting a new consolidated business that was still like in that sector of what I already knew. And it was international. And I thought, this is a great way to kind of grow and learn and meet new people and kind of expand. How do I build these relationships and negotiate these deals? And so I decided to jump and go to that. It's like what if I would have stayed? I still kind of look back and think, oh, there was a lot of things I really loved about my role there. And I proudly, I still actually do a lot of work with Comcast and people still remember me, which that's what's important, is when you have a really positive impact that people like your impact kind of stays, or, there's a shadow of you. And that other company was super challenging. It was really hard. There was a lot of things that I just was like, oh, I've done politics, I can do this, but it was a lot more challenging than I had expected. But I was working for a former CFO that worked for Steve Jobs and sold Pixar. So he had a really interesting way of negotiating and build. And when I said he also had a very different way of negotiating. And so looking back, it all makes sense. Even negotiating my leaving that company, negotiating with that company, and some of the things that happened to me really shaped who I am today, what I can help other people with. And it really led me to writing a book and creating this business that I love. And so while in the moments, man, there were some dark times through that journey. I have never really said that I think it was all for a reason to get me to where I am today. And it took me a long time to be able to say that out loud.
Today's podcast is brought to you by Exec HQ, a C-suite fractional firm providing elite executives for your business. If you're having challenges taking your business to the next level, if you want to augment your leadership team, or prepare your company for increased growth, profitability, and an eventual successful exit, we have seasoned executives from every C-suite position ensuring a perfect fit for your needs and the dynamics of your industry. You will work with senior leaders who like to roll up their sleeves while checking their egos at the door. They can help your business in specific services such as strategic planning, executive leadership coaching, financial management, corporate governance, marketing, sales management, and many other advisory solutions vital to your business success. That's exechq.com. To learn more, go to exechq.com or email Jeff Palacio at jeff.palacio@exechq.com.
What were your big learnings? I mean, I went, I think to your LinkedIn. It looked like you were, it was a global position, senior VP. You had 1,000 employees under your leadership. I mean, what was that like? I mean, maybe you did that at Comcast, but it seems like this was a big job too.
Yeah. Yeah. And there was just so many locations. Like that doesn't seem as like nowadays, the remote workforce is so, it doesn't seem crazy to think that you have international operations and you have people all around the country. So that was a challenge in and of itself because we used conference calls, we didn't ever do video. That
Right.
was just not.
Right.
So when you think about that time and having that influence when you don't see people and you have to travel to get to know them, I think that was one of the biggest challenges is how do you build those relationships? You just had to be there is
Yeah.
the answer. You just had to get there. So business was done in person, but that just made it sometimes taking longer to do. I think what I didn't realize was they were putting together a bunch of companies that were all very sophisticated existing companies that were brought under one entity. And I was the first employee under that. And so not really understanding how to bring a culture together. You have all these different cultures. And so I would do it a lot different had
Sure.
I been there now, knowing what I know today and having the tools that we have today would be such a different thing. But it was the impact that you have on people is so important.
Right.
And as a leader, how do you show up in the best ways that you can in those moments? And for me, it's always been authenticity and honesty and transparency and having difficult conversations. I've always been told that I can have a tough conversation in a way that people can hear it.
Yeah.
I'm really proud of that.
Yeah.
Somebody told me that after working for me that I could do that, and I never really thought about it.
Yeah.
But to me, it was like, just do it, get it over with, and do it because I wanted to make them better. It just didn't seem like there was a
Right.
formula to it, but that's
Yeah.
hard for a lot of people.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That's a gift that definitely you have. So it looked like after you leave Encompass Digital Media, I think is the company we're talking about, you maybe started the toe dip strategy of creating your own business. Is that what it?
That's exactly right.
Yeah. So talk about creating that, and it looked like you continued to do other jobs working for companies. So kind of
Yeah.
early proponent of side gigs, I guess, side hustles. So talk about that period.
Yeah, that definitely wasn't popular at that time, but it allowed me. People always are like, "How did you jump and do your own thing?" It Doing it as a side hustle is definitely the way to do it, and not in a conflict with the company that you're in. So I worked for a consulting company, which was a great experience. I'd never done anything like that, and then I worked for a startup with a really, really good friend of mine. It was super fun with her. And I did do coaching on the side all along the way because of that comment that somebody said to me. And I thought, and my coach actually told me early on, he goes, "You would be really good at this." And I was like, "Wow." And so those pieces of evidence stay with you. You just kind of like, huh, it's these comments. And so I started doing it and just loving being a silent partner to somebody to tell them how do they get more of themselves, or what do they need to change, or how do you make them more confident in their leadership and just make them kind of unlock things for them. I'm not the magic for them. It's just I am a really good question giver, and the questions are powerful things. It gets people to think, and it gets them to find the discoveries that they need. And so it just kind of evolved, and I really started loving that. And people started saying to me, "You talk about this and you're kind of, da dun da dun da dun, but then when you talk about this, you come alive." And
Right.
so I started going, "Oh, I should do this because I come alive."
Right. Interesting. Yeah, you have the gift of getting the magic that the person already has just to express that, right? That's
Mhm.
really, really nice. So, it's one thing when you're a senior VP and you work for a company and, whether you're a great leader or a bad leader, you still have a title and some prestige that goes with it and people treat you differently. But
Yeah.
when you go to your own business and you're just, yeah, you're the president of your own company, but you're just one of many people that does executive coaching. Like what was the
Mhm.
big surprise, kind of doing that, as well as, how did you go about it when you were doing other jobs as a W-2?
It's funny that you say, I remember when I left that company and this woman said, "People won't talk to you anymore." And I thought, wow, I can't believe she only talks to people because of their title. There was some ego, I think, involved in my roles in corporate and having the title or the position or being the head negotiator or having that, kind of place. And luckily, as you get older, you start to just become really comfortable in your own shoes. And I think at this time in my life, I don't need those things to make me understand where I have value. And I don't think this is going to sound like I was consciously making this shift, but I started seeing my value through the eyes of other people. And when I would hear that, "Oh my gosh, that shifted me exactly where I needed to be. I couldn't do this without you." Those kind of things are what started really filling me up. And how do I give people that confidence? So I think it had to do a little bit with where I was in my life, and that, at the time I had to get enough business because I had to make money to pay my mortgage. So it was more about, man, I got to start hustling to get this. And I just did a good job, and more came. And then all of a sudden I'm like, "Oh my gosh, I'm going to do this full time. I have enough going on." So that's why I like the side hustle, because it makes you kind of understand your superpowers a little bit more. You can
Right.
get that in focus for you so that you're not just jumping in and building a website and then waiting for the phone to ring.
Right. Yeah, because you'll be waiting a long time. Uh,
Yes.
yeah. So interesting. So you write a book The Art of Everyday Negotiation Without Manipulation. When did that book idea come to you, and what was your writing process? How long did it take to publish the book?
I often get people that know me that say, "Hey, can you talk to this executive and help her through a negotiation?" And it's not a service I provide, but I'm always like, "Sure, I'll do that." And so I met this woman and I met with her 3 times over the phone. And the last time I talked to her, her name is Tracy. She said, "Slow down." I remember I was driving in my car and I was just kind of telling her what to say. And she goes, "Slow down, slow down. You have so much, you're so good at framing this. You're so good at the words." And I'd always been told that at Comcast too, like even by peers, like, "Ooh, you have a really good frame on things. Like you're able to give the frame." And she goes, "You should write a book." And I just was like, "Okay." I kind of like, I always had that, like if somebody told me to do something, I kind of just did it. Like they saw something in me. And like, I wasn't a writer. I, love that we have Chat GPT and Grammarly now,
Right.
like all those things so help me. So I was like, that's a good challenge. And they say that, and I totally subscribe to this, the hardest part of writing a book is finishing it. And I was about halfway through, so tired of my own thoughts and questioning, is this going to be beneficial to anybody? I feel like I keep repeating myself. And COVID hit. And my daughter, who used to sit in a desk right next to me, who's 25, said, "Mom, you should just spend 2 hours a day and just get it done." And my parents are both still alive. And I wanted to finish just so they could see that I wrote a book. I don't know, just wanted to finish. So I finished. And I remember I asked Jennifer Bergman, my friend, that you said you saw her thing.
Yeah,
And
I
I
know.
called
Yeah.
her and said, "I'm done with my book." By the way, I had a great editor. So every time it got returned to me, I had to read it. You have to read your own book so many times. You're so tired of your book. But by the 6th time it got better and better. Like I hired somebody that made it I didn't want it to be a read of love or whatever it's called. They did it because they know me. I wanted people to get something out of it. And
Right.
I remember I said to Jennifer, "Hey, can you, like she had a great title. Can you read no, I just said, can you write a thing on my book, to say how great it is?" And she goes, "Well, send it to me so I can read it." I'm like, "I don't want anybody to read my book."
Yeah.
Was the first thing I thought. I was like, "Oh my gosh, I don't want people to read this." And so
That's funny.
that was a really great journey for me to be okay with letting people hear my stories because I was very vulnerable in my book and
Yeah.
probably because I didn't expect anybody to really read it.
Right.
And now when I had a woman come to me like a few months ago and say she'd never met me, but she read my book and she got the promotion that she already had 2 no's on. And I'm like, my book did that? Like it was
Wow.
so shocking,
Yeah.
but wow, this impact.
Yeah.
So it's been a journey to see what that
Yeah.
feels like, but
Yeah.
that's why I wrote it. And then I didn't know Tracy. I linked in her and said, "Give me your address because I'm going to send you the book you inspired me to write." And she was like, "What?" She had no
Wow.
idea.
That's fantastic. By the way, I love the book cover, the art. Oh my God, it's really good. I don't know if you
Thank
came
you.
up with that or it's the person
They
you were
helped me.
working with.
They hired somebody to help me
Yeah.
do it. I said I
Yeah.
wanted it to be kind of confusing, but thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't
No.
do it, but
Yeah. It's very cool.
thanks.
Uh, yeah. I'll make sure to post it when I'll put it in the podcast description so people can link to it. You have a podcast. You've been a TEDx speaker. What do you enjoy most about what you do today? Maybe opposed to when you first started, like what brings you joy?
I'm really proud. I was really good one-on-one and I was really intimidated when I'd be in a room and facilitating a discussion. And I've gotten really good at it. And meaning that I've gotten the feedback that people will be like, "Wow, you're really engaging and you make everybody feel seen."
Yeah.
And so that seeing my evolution in my confidence and seeing that my skills are getting even better, I'm really proud of myself.
Yeah.
And I think of that little girl, that I was that didn't know what I was going to do. And I'm really proud of what I've done. And mostly because of the impact I can have on others. And as a mom of 3 girls, I think also just to show them that anything is possible. So I love having impact on people. And that may sound like such a thing to say, but I'm saying that from like, I mean, that's my honest answer is when somebody says, you said this, I needed to hear this. And it wasn't because it was my wisdom, but I said it at the right time that they needed it.
Yeah.
And so that's huge to me.
Yeah. No, that's so great. Yeah, I think we talked about this. You know, you're an expert in negotiation, uh, especially since you wrote a book about it. But it's almost like public speaking. Like people are just, they rather, you know, do anything else, you know.
Totally.
And we talked about it, it's like, and I think people that are very, they think it's bad to stand up for themselves. So I gave the example of, I love to help recent college graduates in their job search
Mhm.
and have a 6-week course about it and help them. But, one of the things I talk about is negotiation and, you know, and we talk about Adam Grant's book, Give and Take. And it's, it's really about, you know, getting out of the mindset like I shouldn't be asking for stuff.
Yeah.
That's not right. And I tell recent college graduates, if you negotiate $5,000 more salary in your first position, it's worth over $1 million in the course of a lifetime, because that's your salary to start with, and then every other raise or promotion or going to a new job is based on what you currently make,
Yeah.
right? And it's the same thing. And Adam Grant would say, you have to get out of the mindset. If you like, you don't want to ask for it because it sounds like, you want to take, but
Mhm.
think about if you're, a spouse and you're the primary wage earner,
Mhm.
and you're not negotiating for you, you're negotiating for your family, because money provides things for
Absolutely.
your family too.
Yeah.
And if you get out of that mindset, but I would love to hear your thoughts if that's the most, kind of roadblock to people negotiating, or give your kind of like, you know, 2 or 3 key things that you see with working with people over the years.
Yeah, I really like that mindset and so much that you said. It's we believe that there are these 5 things that are high stakes, buying a car, negotiating a salary, getting a divorce, buying a house. Like we think we all have these high stakes, but high stakes is really personal. High stakes is what's important to you. So we face these situations every day. So when people, whatever that high stakes is for them, they think the night before, okay, I better go watch a YouTube video on negotiation to make sure that I need to call somebody to help me make sure. But when you think about these strategies that negotiators use, like framing your ask, being really clear about the outcome that's important to you, your floor and ceiling, anchoring your ideas, practicing silence, listening and understanding the interests of the other party, those are all things that make us better humans
Right.
and better leaders. And so when we practice these things every day and we call ourselves a negotiator, we say, "Hey Jeff, we're peers. Let's negotiate our priorities for the next month." I'm not saying to you, I'm going to take advantage of you. I'm saying, I want to understand what's important to you too. So I feel like we all have this negative relationship with negotiation because we've been taken advantage of, or it's scary to ask. And we have to first shift that view of that and allow ourselves to see it differently. And even it took me a while to say I'm an expert negotiator. I still, when you said that, I was like, oh, I don't know if I'm an expert negotiator. Like you're giving me too much. Like even people that talk about it all the time. So I think even just like shifting your mindset around it. And I think if you're asking me for a few key things for people to think about is start to think about what's high stakes to you. And it could be having a conversation with somebody that is close to you and it's going to hurt their feelings. That could be high stakes to you. It could be having a difficult conversation with somebody that is in your organization and you've been putting it off and that you should have had it last week, but you haven't had it. And so the stakes keep getting higher and higher. And then taking time to think about what is the best possible outcome for this conversation And what do I need to do to prepare to make sure that I'm objective as I can be? I can be really thoughtful about how I frame this conversation up to them. What do I need to do to give them the context? It makes you more intentional about moving through. And when you start to practice those things and go, hey, I'm negotiating, then those really high stakes things, you have a plan for, or you at least have a way to move through them. And so it is looking at it a little bit differently, is what I always talk about. And I think it goes hand in hand with leadership.
Yeah.
I think that great leaders adopt a negotiator mindset so that they can be more intentional in every conversation. And even when a low stakes situation in a regular day-to-day meeting suddenly becomes high stakes because somebody gets angry or somebody walks in and throws a grenade, or funding has just been pulled.
Right.
What do you do? And go, okay, this is high stakes. I got to make sure that I have situational awareness about what I need to do right now in this moment to find that best possible outcome.
Right.
So that's how I look at it.
Yeah, no, I love that. Two things come to mind. One is raising kids. So I had a mindset early on. I was not going to negotiate things that really didn't matter. So if my son wanted to wear shorts to junior high and it was 20 degrees out, I would say, Nick, you can wear shorts, but just don't complain. It's cold. That's all. You can. I don't care. I'm not going to argue. If you want to wear the same shorts and shirt a couple of days in a row, I don't take it. It's not going to reflect on me. So that's just a kind of a aside. But the other thing, I'm curious about this. So obviously, it makes a lot of sense for a job negotiator in terms of getting a salary or a compensation offer. Makes total sense for somebody to negotiate that, and you should always, unless you're totally happy with it, but maybe you want to negotiate something else besides salary. But
Exactly.
that aside, I'm curious, do you ever, because all these, when I hired people, I wanted them to be happy with the money I gave. I would never give somebody the same amount of money they were making today. I'm going to give them more as long as I could, right? I mean, sometimes you're strapped with, budget constraints, but I wanted them to be happy. But do you work with people that, because there's a lot of managers want to get people on the cheap, and so do you ever work with people that say, well, I want to get people at the lowest possible thing because that helps my company. They're not paying as much money, more profit, or whatever. I'm just curious.
Yeah. I haven't worked with anybody directly that has done that, but I agree with you wholeheartedly. It's a very short-sighted. There's one thing to have budget constraints and be like, oh, I think you're the best candidate, and my offer, isn't in your range. I'd love you to consider it, but I have, budget constraints. But what else is important to you? Maybe I can help you get exposure. Like, can we talk about what other benefits would be valuable to you? That's such a great conversation. And just think how that opens up that person's, that builds trust. It builds that relationship. And it's such a better way of doing it besides just be like, well, I'm going to I'm going to make sure
Right.
I do that.
Yeah, maybe they want to go to a $600 Seth Godin workshop
Yeah.
or something, and that's like, oh, $600. Yeah, sign
Exactly.
here. Yeah,
Exactly.
yeah. Susie, I love helping two groups of people with great leaders' advice like you. That first group, you recent college graduates, so now they begin their career journey. What advice would you have for them in terms of getting their first job and starting that professional career?
Network with people, and don't go into it with ask your parents, ask their friends, ask anybody that's in your area, who would be somebody good that I could learn from, and go have the conversation without thinking about what job they have, and just learn and meet people. You never know what's going to come out of those conversations. And also be really clear about what you want to do. It's really hard when people come to me and go, I'll do anything, that makes me do nothing. But if they say, I want a job as a project manager in this level of company, I will automatically sort in my head who I know, and I'll make that connection. but don't put it on me. If you, or I hate when people go, if you know anybody that's looking for somebody that's good,
Yeah.
that doesn't help me.
No
I'm
one,
not going
no
to
one,
advocate for you.
no one you know is, no one.
Yeah.
I say 99.999% of the people you meet don't have a job for you, don't know of a job for you. You have to build a relationship, get their insight.
Yeah.
And it's funny you say networking, because when I teach that 6-week course, um, I it's the negotiation of the salary they're terrified
Mhm.
of, because
Yep.
I teach the silence thing and all that, but do your research on what jobs are paying
Yep.
and yada yada. But the other thing they're definitely afraid of is reaching out to people to meet with them to get their insight, especially the introverts. So, but yeah, it's just very interesting, because that's people
Mhm.
know people and people know companies. So,
Yep.
me being in Kansas City, I've been here a long time. I know a lot of the companies in town, but I'm amazed at the people I meet that I had no idea existed, and the companies they lead, and they had no idea existed. So,
Yeah.
uh, yeah. That second group is that group that wants to expand outside being an individual contributor, where
Mhm.
individual contributors are leaders also, but that person that wants to take this step where they're actually responsible for a group of people. What advice would you have for them as they begin that leadership journey?
Yeah. I talk to my girls about this a lot because they're at that cusp. And I be a mentor to people, get used to giving people feedback in a way that is meaningful to them. Think about, how can I give them feedback that's going to help them be better? And how do I want to frame that to them? And that's the best way to practice those leadership qualities or skills, practicing those, because like you said earlier, leadership is a journey. There's great books on it. There's great skill building development programs you can take, but you always will be evolving as a leader. You'll always have something to learn. So start now and look at some of the things that you need to develop as a leader and start practicing those.
Yeah, I love that. Susie, you do so many great things. You do executive coaching, team building, keynote speaking, workshops. How could people reach out to you if they're interested for you to help them?
Yeah, my website is susietomenchok.com, which I know my name will be in the show notes. Don't try to spell it yourself. Even my mom misspells it all the time. And also I have you could go to negotiationlove.com, because everybody should love negotiation. And you can get in touch with me there. That's probably easy if you're listening. Negotiationlove.com, and you can sign up for my newsletter. I just talk about adopting a negotiator mindset, stories from my everyday life, and you can connect with me there as well.
That's so great. Susie, I love your energy. Just enjoyed our first conversation a couple of
Me
weeks
too.
ago, and this one is even better. So thank you so much for being on the Corporate Couch today.
Thank you so much for having me.
It was so great to meet Susie, and I loved our conversation. Her energy, and she's just a nice person. And I don't know, there's so many good things about her. Just, she had 1,000 people in a global company in her organization. And, most people, and this is obviously a generalization, but most people, are not as nice as Susie has, that have that,
They
many
reach a
people.
level and they lose that
Yeah.
niceness, right?
Yeah, and just her energy, and she's positive, and she loves unlocking the magic of others. And she was in the telecom space in the heyday, knowing nothing about, I wouldn't say nothing about technology, but not a lot. Um, she was the only female in the room, and she became this, I'm not gonna say high powered negotiator, meaning because that you get you get pictures of, kind of hard nosed negotiation. It was just, you really have to be clear on what you want. And she even in the interview said, I'm not a master negotiator," which I don't know. She wrote a book,
Even though
The
she
Art
wrote a
of
book on
Everyday
it.
Negotiation, without manipulation. And a very cool cover of that book, by the way. It's
Oh,
really
yeah.
cool. Um, but yeah, I just so many things about her. And she was the first guest that she admitted, she said something about a question I asked. She goes, yeah, it's like therapy on this podcast. I go, well, there you go, Susie. That's why it's called the Corporate Couch. The first guest.
She's the first person that realized that. Double entendre there with the couch.
Exactly. Joe, what you think of Susie and the conversation?
Oh, yeah, everything that you said. And she's the first prom queen that we've had on the Corporate Couch, too, which I thought was interesting. She
I'm
was
not sure she really wanted to admit that, but
well, hey, I wear it proudly, you know. If
yeah, and then she said she didn't know how she got it because she wasn't popular. I'm like, okay, well, whatever. I can see her popular because she's so friendly.
Yeah, she is so down to earth and everything. One thing that I caught that she was talking about when she got the job at Comcast was that she said that she had to, and she put it this way, had to pretend that she knew something, and I think pretend is probably not doing it justice, but it was actually
when they were dealing with Major League Baseball, she wasn't a sports fan.
The advice that she got was just be you, and be confident with who you are and what you are. And if you think about how that confidence has to come up in her life, she has a communications degree, and here she is negotiating these contracts or business, whatever it is, for satellite. And you know that I'm an editor, and I edit both audio and video. And you've heard me say this before several times, Jeff, that the difference between editing video versus editing audio alone is like 100-fold, because there are 100 more things that can go wrong in video than what can go wrong in audio. If you're editing audio, you only have to edit essentially one thing. There's a waveform there, and you have to work with it. But when you're editing video, there's all sorts of different things. There's all sorts of different formats. You have to edit the lighting. You have to look over the left shoulder of the person talking. You have to do everything like that. There's 100 more things that can go wrong with video. Layer on top of that then satellite transmission, and think about how complicated satellite transmissions are. And she was talking about encryption and all that stuff that goes on with that. And she was doing all that with essentially OJT, on the job training. And she could still exude the confidence that was necessary in doing something like that. It was an amazing interview, and she seems like an amazing person. I would love to get to know her better.
Yeah, and one of her peers said, you know, where did you get your engineering degree? Or
where did you get your
And she was a journalism major.
It was amazing.
And plus, I love that she started with, her coaching and all that when she had another job.
Mm-hmm.
So, early pioneer of side gigs, right? So, and that was what brought her joy. And, she really wanted to make people's lives better, and she's continuing to do that today. So it's just great energy, keynote speaker. It's just really, really good. So, Joe, what leadership advice do you have for our great listening audience today?
Well, today we're going to go to that great philosopher named Ellen DeGeneres. And Ellen one time said this. She said, "Accept who you are, unless you're a serial killer."
Thank you so much for listening to this episode of The Corporate Couch. If you enjoy the podcast, I would love for you to take 2 minutes out of your day to rate us 5 stars and write a review. Please join me next week to learn from another great leader sharing their professional journey and insights.